So I want to talk today about valuation of assets in a divorce, and particularly when the valuation of the asset occurs. This came up recently, this year in particular, 2022, when I'm recording this video. There's been a lot of decrease in everything. The markets are down. Now we're starting to see the real estate values are going down. And so this valuation date can be more important, especially in this context. You can file for divorce, and if you have kids, there's a 6-month waiting period if you have minor children. So a divorce case can definitely go on for an appreciable amount of time. I mean, you could be getting divorced once you filed. That process could go on for 10 months, could go on a year. I met with someone this morning where their divorce case has been pending for an entire year. So the valuation date is becoming relevant to their divorce case because they have these assets, they have a house, they have accounts, they have retirement accounts, they have whatever it is that they own. When do you value those assets for purposes of dividing those assets in a divorce? Do you divide them? Do you value those assets? Do you look at the value, the date the complaint was filed for this guy a year ago? You say, okay, what was the house worth a year ago? We're going to use that for the value. What was your 401k worth a year ago? We'll use that for the value. What were the savings accounts at, or these other things? Do you use that, or do you use the date where we are now? Now that we're putting pen to paper, we finally think we have an agreement. We're doing a judgment of divorce and they're going to be done. Do we then look at the value of the house now? What's the house worth? What's the 401k worth? Because the house is worth less. 401k is worth a lot less. It's down 25% just since January. Do we use those dates, or is there something in between that makes sense? Between a year ago when the divorce was started and now it's being completed, is there some point in time along the way? Or, what if you did an agreement 6 months ago, you thought you had a settlement agreement, but you didn't finish everything and you didn't have a total agreement on your divorce case? That can create a lot of problems too. So valuation date can become important. What's the date that you use for purposes of valuing something? And it can come into play when you're looking at things like property that you owned before the divorce. You have premarital property and you want to know what the value of it was. You're looking at what's the valuation date on a house, a bank account. If you owned it before the marriage, if you bought it during the marriage, when do you value it? So you want to know the context of that, of what's going to be to your advantage. Is it to your benefit to use older valuation dates, times when these accounts were higher, times when they were lower? Well, I mean, it certainly could be, right? Especially if you're talking about you're going to keep your retirement account, your wife's going to keep hers, and you're trying to just equalize them. Or maybe you just say, well, we'll each keep our own because they're very similar values. So you need to know what statements are we using? And a problem you can run into with valuation dates with accounts, with retirement accounts, with bank accounts, with investment accounts is the documents become stale. If this divorce has been going on for a year and you haven't been able to figure it out for whatever reason, you can't get an agreement, and last time you exchanged data on statements, last time you exchanged these bank statements, investment account statements, retirement account statements was 6 months ago, you got to take another look at them. With the way things are going currently, 401k statements they're going to be considerably lower than they were 6 months ago. Not always the case. Most of the time they're going up over time. You're contributing to a 401k over time. And so that's another valuation date type of question that comes up. If I'm getting divorced and the divorce has been pending for a year because we couldn't resolve it, and I'm contributing to my 401k during that entire year, are we using that? Does my wife now get half of those amounts that were contributed during, or should the proper valuation date really be the date the complaint was filed? Isn't that really when we went our separate ways? When somebody filed for divorce, is this really a marriage anymore? I mean, that's a valid question too, and why people make these arguments about valuation dates. The why really is they're trying to get a financial advantage. But the reason that they use is, well, you say, well, we filed for divorce a year ago. That should be when we look at all these assets. That is when things should be divided, because really after that, we're not really a husband and wife anymore. There's just a divorce case pending. That's not reasonable to call it a marriage. We know it's coming to an end. So are there advantages there? Is there an advantage to you to use the date of your complaint for divorce for looking at the value of your house or your bank account or retirement account, investment account, 401k? And it's possible to do that. The question I got this week too was about valuation of a house and when to do it. is somebody was coming out to do an appraisal on the house, and the person asking me the question about it felt like they really should be using the value a year ago, because that's when the divorce case was started. That's when significant things happened. That's when his wife moved out and left. So let's use that date. And it's possible to do that. You know, a real estate appraiser can do what's called a historic appraisal. They can tell you the date of your house now. They can tell you the value of your house now. They can also tell you the value of what your house was worth a year ago. They can go back whenever you want to go back. You know, sometimes you need to be looking at the value of your house historically because you owned it before the marriage. We need to look at what was your house worth at the time you bought it, what was it worth at the time you got married, maybe you got married 10 years ago, and what's it worth now, because you're trying to protect that asset as a premarital asset. You're saying, look, I had this house, I had been paying it down, it was worth this amount when I bought it, and then it was worth this different amount when we got married. Now it's worth a third amount now that we're getting divorced, and I need to know what those three different amounts were, because I'm trying to make a claim that I shouldn't have to split half of the house with my wife because I owned it before the marriage. So valuation dates can be important. They can be important with stocks. They can be important with stock options. They can be important with when things like stock options are vested, or when pensions are vested, or when parts of retirement accounts are vested or not vested. That can all be affected by when you do this valuation date thing too as well. So something to keep in mind. It's a concept that's out there. It's part of divorce cases. So hopefully that helps. Thanks.